I think it was a historic night. Congresswoman-elect Stevens and Slotkin changing the dynamic. The more representation around the table, the more likely we are to get policies that people want and expect from our government.
You know, this didn't work out the way that I had anticipated.
I couldn't be more proud to be the next Congresswoman from the 8th District.
An election that made history in Michigan. Welcome to One Detroit. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us. From record turnout to the number of women taking office to seats that flipped parties, change is here. And starting at the top office in the state, Gretchen Whitmer will be Michigan's next governor, Garland Gilchrist, the state's first black lieutenant governor. And the list of things Whitmer wants to do is long, and she's ready.
The voters of the state voted to reject bigotry and hate. They voted to reject the divisive politics that seem to be permeating everything, to reject, agendas that don't actually put our kids' education first or fix problems. They voted to reject attacks on women's health and the health care that we all have come to appreciate here in the state of Michigan. And we voted for clean drinking water and safe roads, affordable car insurance, and a level playing field. And I feel so great about the result and so determined to start building partnerships with my partners in the legislature. That's going to be critical. Like I said, we've got just 55 days until January 1st, and so I'm excited about starting a transition and building the team that I will take in with me into the governor's office. So, for the people of Michigan, for those of you who voted for me, I thank you for your support. For those of you who didn't vote for me, I want you to know I'm still going to be working for you. I will work for everyone in this state. Our governor's office doesn't belong to a person or a political party. It belongs to you. And you are the ones that I'm going to work for every single day as your governor. So, to those whose support I have yet to earn, I want you to know there is a seat at my table for everyone who is genuinely interested in solving problems.
Whitmer's win at the top of the ticket signaled a Democratic flip. Jocelyn Benson won Secretary of State, Dana Nessel, Attorney General. 2 key congressional seats also flipped, but it was a long wait for the final numbers, especially in the 8th Congressional District between incumbent Mike Bishop and Democrat challenger Alyssa Slotkin. It wasn't until 1 in the morning that Slotkin finally declared victory.
This is what happens when you set a goal.
I just got off the phone with Alyssa Slotkin. I wished her well and let her know that we want to work with her in the transition period.
After months of tough campaigning, door knocking, nasty and constant TV ads, Alyssa Slotkin ousted incumbent Congressman Mike Bishop.
We have to model the behavior that we want our friends and our family and our kids to believe in. I want to say a word to Mr. Bishop, to Mike Bishop, okay? He and his family have been in elected office for a long time. We thank them for their service. And certainly, Dave and I know just how hard it is on families. So to his wife, Christina, and to his kids, we thank them for doing and standing up for their country, because they did that.
What we got to do is forgive and move on and seek peace.
Michigan's congressional seats were part of a national play to gain Democratic control in the U.S. House. And the closely watched campaign in the 8th brought international interest. Sky News from England, a reporter from Tokyo.
I am very happy to announce that I think as of today, my dad no longer has to threaten shooting the television for seeing those attack ads.
I would ask you in the future that you turn off your TVs, you turn off the social media, and really remember why we're in this in the first place, and that's for love of country.
The attack ads in the 8th were not unique, but part of a larger look at the tone of this election season.
It's your health care.
No one would have ever expected that there would be tens of millions of dollars spent on a United States House district. It was scurrilous in many ways, attacks on me, lies, deception, all of that weaponized by tens of millions of dollars. So, they really wanted the seat bad, and they found a way to get it, and that's just the way that works.
Now Alyssa Slotkin will go to Washington, D.C.
You have flipped the seat. I could not be prouder to be going to Washington in a couple of months. And let me just say, they have no idea what's coming for them. So thank you very much. Thank you.
And she'll join Haley Stevens, who won the 11th, and Rashida Tlaib, who won the 13th. Tlaib will be one of 2 Muslim women in Congress. Her victory celebration a given after her primary win, but exciting nonetheless. She said she found inspiration from her mother, who raised 14 children in Southwest Detroit.
I will always remember that people treated her differently. And all of that comes with me when I go to the United States Congress. Because this country is not about dividing families when it comes to immigration. It's not about walls. It's not about all of the hateful things when you think about immigration. It's about the fact that my mother can stand here in the United States of America and watch her daughter become a member of the United States.
A lot of history being made in one night. So let's take a look at all of this change with Nolan Finley from the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson from WDET. Nothing I like better than sitting down with you guys after election. And I don't say this very often, but Nolan was right, because when we start talking about the governor's race, it was last week we actually had an argument between the 3 of us about what the margin would be. And you said 9 points. I said I think it's going to be a lot closer to that. But boom, Nolan.
Well, that's what our pollster, Richard Schuba, was telling us, that there would be. He was thinking a +7, +9 Democratic turnout. And as we've looked at the numbers from past election, Republican turnout has, they operate within a narrow range, Republicans do, in terms of turnout. Their turnout, upper level, 1.8 million. That's what Snyder got when in his first election, when he beat Verge Monero. That's what Bill Schuette got Tuesday night when he lost. It was all about Democratic turnout. Democrats control their own fate in Michigan. When they turn out big, they always win.
Well, this was the largest margin that we've seen in a very, very long time. But taking a step back, Stephen, what does Tuesday night really say about what we believe in, what we stand for in the state of Michigan?
I don't know. I mean, I think there are a lot of messages and sub-messages and subtext. I mean, I think especially when you pull the lens back and look at the national picture as compared to what happened in Michigan, there wasn't a whole lot of two-sidedness to what happened here. I mean, if you think about it, if you were a Republican, you woke up Tuesday morning in control of every part of state government from top to bottom. By the time the night ended, the only things you had left were the legislature and the Supreme Court. That's a huge swing. I can't think of the last time that happened alone, that the top 3 constitutional offices all switched parties in one election. But again, when you pull the lens back nationally, it's a more complicated picture. And I don't know that we're going to know for a long time just what voters wanted, or more importantly, what the people they elected are going to be able to deliver. There's still going to be a lot of split government, mixed messaging at the top.
So let's talk about that. Gretchen Whitmer has a very large agenda of things that she would like to get done, but she still has a Republican-controlled House and Senate here in the state of Michigan. How is that going to impact her agenda when she's talking about spending money on roads, spending money on education, Nolan?
Well, she's going to have to reach a consensus. I mean, when she was minority
Do you think she
leader,
can do that?
I don't know. When she was minority leader of the Senate, she wasn't all that collaborative with the Republican governor. Now she's facing a Republican majority. Her challenge will be even greater than Snyder's was. I mean, she's going to have to find the areas where they both share priorities. Roads and education are those areas. They'll just have to find solutions.
So I actually asked Gretchen that question a few weeks ago. She's been talking about this idea of reaching across the aisle, working with the other party. I said, give me some examples of people on the other side of the aisle in the legislature who you can work with. She talked about Mike Shirkey, who is likely to be the Senate Majority Leader, the great relationship she says she has with him, a relationship that developed over their time together in the legislature.
Well, that's good. That's one person, though. You've had massive turnover in the State House and Senate.
But she went down the list of people who will still be there in January, who she has some relationship with. And I think I talked with someone who was an advisor to Rick Snyder when he ran 8 years ago, and he compared Gretchen's campaign and message to Rick Snyder's campaign and message 8 years ago. It was not an overly partisan message. It was about solving problems. It was about reaching across the aisle. And this person said, look, if she actually approaches it that way, she may get more of what she wants than people think.
It's interesting you bring up the campaign and how she campaigned, because you, Nolan, this week poked back at Bill Schuette and said he was the Hillary Clinton of 2018, that he did not run the campaign that he needed to run.
No, he didn't. But I mean, just one quick piggyback on this. Whitmer will be dealing with a much smaller Republican majority than we've had in the past. She doesn't have to convert that many Republicans.
Right.
Schuette, I mean, he did. He didn't win the independent vote that he needed. But again, he drew 1.8 million.
He got the votes he was supposed to get.
He got the votes all of the votes it took for Snyder to win. I don't know that anybody could have countered this Democratic wave as a Republican, but we won't know because he didn't do much right in that campaign. He stuck with a message that wasn't moving his numbers. He stuck with this Whitmer grand old message.
Yeah.
That turned women voters off, and women voters came out in droves.
Yeah, they sure did.
He never addressed his own likability issues. There were a lot of Republicans even who didn't like Bill Schuette. He never addressed the things about him he needed to address. He was attack, and it didn't work. He had to sell himself.
I think everyone around the country is busy looking at their own state and how their own voters turned out and what kind of changes they have at their state level. But when you have Whitmer and you have Jocelyn Benson, you have Dana Nessel now on those top jobs in the state, what does this make Michigan look like to the rest of the country, Stephen?
Well, I mean, first of all, the fact that they're all women is huge, right? That sends a really, really strong message about the power of female voters, the power of female representatives in our state. I think that you will see some tensions arise between Whitmer and Nessel, who I think Dana Nessel plans to be a very aggressive Attorney General, aggressive on social issues, aggressive in a partisan nature that might rub Gretchen Whitmer, who's trying to bring everyone together, the wrong way. I think the historic moment here is the moment, right? 3 women will lead this state in 2019. Who would have thunk, 8 years ago that this is where we
You have a lot of people saying it's about time. Nolan, how does this make Michigan look?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it'll depend on how they govern. Very quickly they're going to have to produce some results because Gretchen Whitmer made a big promise to Michigan about fixing the damn roads.
And is that what you think now that the electorate is more impatient, that they're going to want to see some
particularly
kind of
when they vote for change? And Republicans went through this with the Tea Party movement. They promised everything. They won the Congress. Yeah. When they got down there, they found out, you can't do a whole lot just with the House. You have to control everything. Even when they controlled everything, they couldn't do all they wanted to do. When people enter into a change election and they change up everything, they expect results. And I think it's going to be key in this first year particularly. I mean, look what Snyder was able to do in his first 6 months.
But he also had his party in control of everything.
Not the Senate or not the House when he first came
in
in.
2010.
In 2010 he came in with everything.
He had everything.
Okay.
I think the strategy here is going to be important, right? That early win. Can you, if you're Gretchen Whitmer, can you deliver on something that you talked about within that first, 100 days even that you're in office?
So what's the low-hanging fruit?
I think it's roads.
Then?
I think if you can go to the legislature with a plan that doesn't offend too much of anybody's sensibilities about where to get the money, and that's really the question. Everybody agrees that we need more money for the roads. Nobody wants to gore their own ox to get it. So I think you've got to gore everybody's ox, right? And bring everybody together on that. If she can do something like that, I think it gives her capital to then broach some of these tougher issues with the legislature and move the needle there. But I would start with roads.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think she's got to raise $1 billion from blended sources. And it's in the legislature's best interest to do this too. But you're going to have some sort of tax increase, some sort of bonding plan, and then probably go in and take a look at the sales tax on gasoline and see if you can divert a portion of that to the roads like they do in other states.
All right, let's go ahead because there's a lot to kind of unpack about what happened on Tuesday night. But I want to talk about the congressional races and two, I think, really big, not big surprises, but people looking at the 8th and what happened with Mike Bishop and Alyssa Slotkin. And Slotkin's campaign, that's such an interesting district because it stretches all the way from Rochester to through Brighton and Lansing. The amount of door knocking that she did and kind of the grassroots campaign and the amount of money that was put into both sides for that seat, Stephen.
It's the kind of money that a decade ago we would have been talking about for a governor's race, right? A statewide race would have
Not far off this year's.
would have been that kind of cash. You know, I didn't expect Alyssa Slotkin to win. I thought that was probably a bridge a little bit too far given the way that district is drawn. And, you know, it turns out it was very close either way, that either one of them probably could have won that race. She will be a very interesting influence in Washington. I talked to her Wednesday morning. This is not your sort of radical left Democrat. I mean, this is a military Democrat who said up front, I don't like what Nancy Pelosi stands for. We're going to have to do something different there. I think on a number of other issues, she will be a difficult get for Democrats when they're counting votes for issues. I asked her about representing a district with so many Republicans in it that still are probably thinking of themselves as Republicans, and that she's a Democrat. She talked about her family background being very split. She's got one parent who's a Democrat. She's got another who's a Republican, and that she's used to managing those things. I think that's it's potentially a real bright light in terms of the way that we bring people together a little better across this great divide, this great political divide that we have. Somebody like her, I think, can step into that breach and reach both sides.
One thing I want to talk about with you, Nolan, also is the 11th, and that going for Haley Stevens and flipping to a Democratic seat, which I think has been the interesting look at Oakland County and how voters have changed their vote there significantly.
Yeah. And I think that race drove turnout. That race, $14 million. Yeah. Up until the 11th, or the 8th, I mean, it was the record. The 8th beat that by about $4 to $5 million. That was an almost $20 million race. Wow. 2/3 of it spent by the Democratic candidates, and the spending washed out, the turnout washed out people in other Republicans down the ticket. Laura Cox, Marty Nolenberg, the Oakland County Commission. This is the first time since Brooks Patterson has taken office that he won't
have Democratic control in the Oakland County
Republican
Commission.
But I think that reflects. I think that actually reflects some demographic shifts that have been at work for a while in Oakland County. It's been a long time coming, partially because of the way people draw lines, right? Which is another big change we had on Tuesday. We're not going to be able to do that anymore. By the way. But Oakland County has been more Democratic in its makeup than it has been in its representation for a long time. Is it a majority Democratic county? This time it was. I don't know if it is forever, but I think this is something we probably should have seen before now.
Oh, I know in my district, state House-wise and state Senate both flipped.
Yeah, and again, this was an extraordinarily turnout year. Yeah. If you get a normal turnout year, what happens in those districts? I think they're still majority Republican districts.
It may be.
Let's look at the proposals really quickly. Proposal 1, legalization of marijuana, and it's always funny, like when you see local reporters who are out at the parties watching the results come in. The person from one television station I saw, they were already lighting up at the pro marijuana party.
January or whatever, right?
Exactly. But that is going to be a significant change for our state.
Well, it's going to be a regulatory nightmare. They've had 10 years to get medical marijuana regulations right, and they're still fighting over it. What I'm afraid of, because you see this movement, the opposition says now they're going to shift to try to get zoning ordinances against these marijuana shops. They're all going to end up in Detroit, just like the medical marijuana ones did. And I don't think that's what the people intended, that they would all be in one place. I think they should be spread out.
I think that 61% of the vote, right?
It's very popular, and there was never a question about that. I was really struck in the last few weeks of the campaign by the move by Detroit ministers to come out and say, we don't want this. We don't think this is great from a cultural perspective in the city of Detroit. And some of what they're objecting to is exactly what Nolan is talking about, the concentration of these businesses in the city will make it look different to Detroiters than it does for everyone else. And we didn't get a chance, because this was a referendum, we didn't get a chance to really talk about that and maybe come up with some ways to mitigate that. And I think that it's unfortunate, because I think you can support the right to do that and be concerned about the effect in different parts of the state. Through legislation, you can figure that out. Through referendum, it's take it or leave it.
And
Do you
that's
think
the
we're
problem.
not? Do you think we're not prepared?
Well, I know we're not.
I think we're
prepared.
really not
And
prepared.
this proposal was written by the people who stand to profit from a 10% tax rate on marijuana. That's half the rate in other states. It's a third of the rate of what's on liquor. The name of it was regulate marijuana the way you do alcohol. I don't have to go to Detroit to buy alcohol. I can buy it at the corner store.
Right.
So why are we treating marijuana so much differently? I think had it gone through the legislature and we'd been able to hash these things out, we'd have gotten a better law, and one that people would have supported.
All right, we got a minute left here. What are you looking for now in these next 6 weeks? I know we're looking at the transition plans for the governor's office, but kind of give me a sense, Stephen, what you're going to be looking at.
I'm really looking at the national picture, which I think is much cloudier than what we have here in Michigan. How does a Democratic House try to figure out ways to deal with the Republican rest of government in Washington?
Yeah, Nolan, what about you?
Well, you know, we look at this transition to Democrats from Republicans in the U.S. House, and we pretend that somehow we had this harmonious all Republican government. The Republican House, the Republican Senate couldn't get things passed when they were together. I mean, they couldn't. Trump couldn't get his agenda through a Republican Congress. He may have a better chance now, because it'll force him to focus on things where he can find consistency.
Well, there's going to be a lot to hash out here in the next couple of months.